Hey everybody, welcome to Fantasy R&R. This is your host Ryan.
And I'm Rob.
And we're going to be getting into a little bit of football early right now as we're coming out of the All-Star break for baseball.
This is Fantasy with Rob and Ryan, Fantasy R&R.
So there's been a lot of action in baseball as of late. Rob, you've made some nice moves. We feel like maybe there's going to be a turning point where we're starting to see some of the teams in first to sixth place might be dropping off a little bit. We're hoping you move up the ladder from six up to a higher spot. I'm kind of done for the season, I think, but would like to move into the middle of the pack myself. Other than that, there's really not too much going on that we can provide insight for like ads and drops at the moment. We're kind of like, everybody's kind of rolling with their team here. I think it'd be actually very hard probably to execute a trade for any of the big names. I mean, I got to be honest, like even in my other league where I'm in second place chasing just a few games behind, I don't see the need now to try and change any stats. I'm not sure if you feel the same way. Like earlier on the phone, you're saying I'm probably not going to make any more moves. Do we just roll it out and hope our guys turn the tide with their numbers and end in a solid place?
Yeah, when it comes to fantasy baseball, I'm always wanting to be somewhere in mid-pack come All-Star break, which is about where we are. Made a huge splash in acquiring Luis Robert for a power bat, and that was my one move I was really trying to do, outside of acquiring certain players that I had already acquired throughout the year. But yeah, I'm ready to be steadfast and start raking with the team I have now.
Yeah, I think I'm the same way. I mean, honestly, everybody is on the table except anyone on my team. Let's talk some football here.
That makes sense.
Going forward, I mean, we're obviously so excited for the Jaguar season. It's not just because like we have high hopes, but also, dude, I think the level of competition we have this year, I don't see it preventing us from getting to the playoffs in the AFC South, but I think it's going to be one of the most fun Jaguar seasons we've ever watched, and I think it's going to be a little bit different than 2017 when we were surprised by the fumbliness of it all, and then 2018 where our hopes were high but got crushed. I think this is actually, 2023 is going to be the year Jaguars fans feel like the Bills and Bengals fans have lately. Because I feel like the Chargers fans, they're like, they don't actually exist, but that team is right on the cusp. But Jacksonville, who has such fair weather fans, but when we are winning, we do come to the stadium. I think this season it's going to be packed. We're going to be playing Mahomes. We're going to be playing Burrow. Monday Night Football in Jacksonville against Joe Burrow. I have to assume this is the year that we really take a step up as an NFL organization. And with that being said, we're so high on Trevor Lawrence, but in this podcast, what we want to talk about is just a couple of names from each position that we think are going to make a bit of a splash that people aren't really looking at. And I don't think it's fair to call this like, just a quintessential sleeper list, or we're not just picking this off of ESPN articles. These are guys we truly believe like, hey, watch out for, because like last year we were all over this podcast, we were talking about how Josh Jacobs was slipping and he turned into the leading rusher last year. I think everybody got very good value out of him. This year, you and me are talking about the Jaguars being insane. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion now. So it's like those guys they're locked
especially
in.
last year we were talking about Trevor Lawrence being a top 8, and he was like top 7, top 6, and I totally agree with you. I don't say just Jags fans. I think NFL fans are going to finally realize that this is happening, and my bold prediction for the year is when we go to London, we beat the brakes off the Buffalo Bills. That's when everybody's going to be talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars. Let's put that in some writing.
Yeah, and you...
Let's jag off.
Yeah, let's jag off. You and me have really talked about that at length, actually, over the years. The Buffalo Bills are at the end of their window. And I think it's really exciting to do what we've been calling on the podcast is not just to toot our horns, jack my own cock off into a baby bear's face. It's all because I really think that we're getting to that point where we see these things coming with the amount of talent you watch in college, and the way I've always kind of understood how an NFL team becomes great with draft picks and stuff. Like, just look at, the Indianapolis Colts from 1998 on, with Edgerrin James, and, you got, Reggie Wayne, guys like that. I think this is finally happening where it's like we called the Bills having a Super Bowl window. They just never close it out. I think that window's closing. I've talked about how I don't like Josh Allen's personality for winning a football team. We've talked about the Bengals starting to look like they're putting together the Bills. We talked about that on this podcast a few years ago. Now the Bengals went to the fucking Super Bowl and at one point, and it's like, you know, here we are. The AFC Championship, and then we were talking about the Eagles were going to be a fantastic team last year with Jalen Hurts. We nailed that one. I feel like this is it. The Jaguars are the new Bengals. The Jaguars are the new Bills. They have put together a young, fast, hungry team. You've already said on this last football podcast you're planning to kind of go after Etienne, Lawrence, and Ridley, and we're going to shake up the draft this year. Rob, what have we been saying? Maybe it's time to start looking at quarterbacks with your first pick. Stop going after the general consensus number one guy. We called GETTR not producing last year. He got hurt. I mean, that was just fucking amazing. I told everybody on this podcast, I'm like, I don't like him as a number one pick, even though I owned him in a keeper league. I was like, I don't see it. So with that being said, look at the strategy now. We've got a young, hungry Jaguars team, and like you said, you could kind of skip over the, hey, I'm going to draft Austin Eckler with my number one pick. Hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get Justin Jefferson. Hey, I'm going to get GETTR. Why not be sneaky? Why not get a running back that can produce in Travis Etienne? We saw it last year. Why not get a quarterback who's capable of throwing 40 TDs this year and get the guy that's going to help make it happen that rounds out the team in Calvin Ridley? If you do those things 3 rounds in a row, everyone will be looking at your team like, what the fuck are you doing? Until it's week 1 and they realize what the fuck you just did.
Yeah, and not to be biased, but I truly believe that all 3 of those players can be top 5 at their position in fantasy, let alone on the field itself. Like, these are like, it's not like we're being home team biased here. I just believe what I saw. Year 1 with T-Law and Etienne in the backfield. I was like, man, they room together. These guys look really good. The Jags draft both. That's
Colts
cool.
game. That Colts game.
And then we go. Yeah, and then in the offseason, we make, and I said it in this podcast, we made the sneakiest move that when we go back and look at the trade deadline last year, we're going to go back and say it was the Jags taking Calvin Ridley. And again, just to push it a little further, hindsight always 20/20 and blah, blah, blah. In that game against the Chiefs, Calvin Ridley makes that catch that Kirk dropped, and the Agnew drop on the 2-yard line does not get dropped. That is, both of those opportunities are going to go to Calvin Ridley this year. And this dude is 3 things about this man. Sure hands, great route running, and is super fast. That sounds like a great combination of a wide receiver to have in me. Yeah, and on top of that, everybody wants to say, well, he skipped a year. I'm like, this isn't a running back. This is a wide receiver. This isn't a quarterback. This is a wide receiver. Wide receivers, either you get the job done or you don't, and we see it in the NFL. How many receivers do we see top 10 picks go in first year and totally blow? A lot. Ridley, when he had to step up and be the man in Atlanta, he was. And now he comes to a team with Christian Kirk, with Zay Jones, with Evan Ingram, with Travis Etienne Jr. I mean, you see what I'm saying here? It's
Rob,
the Jaguars, I feel like the stars are aligning.
Yeah,
100%.
You're not being home biased, and you want to know why we're not being home biased? I know you're worried about sounding home biased, and I always am too, but this is why I'm not this year. This is why I'm not even going to entertain that. It's like, well, you just like the Jaguars because you're from Jacksonville. Yeah, I love the Jaguars, and unlike most Jaguars fans, you and me are there through thick and thin when they suck and when they're popping off, right? But the last 3 years, have we sucked our own cocks and said, like, yeah, Trevor Lawrence is going to throw 40 TDs this year? No, we said he'd take a step up last year. When have we ever said the Jaguars are the team to go after for fantasy football purposes? We've never said that on this podcast, but we said it about the Bills. We said it about the Bengals. We said it about the Eagles. We're saying it about the Jaguars this year. So, with that being said, I want to get into some other guys that, like these Jaguars players, I'm going to be very closely watching over some alternatives, and this has everything to do with where I see these guys falling in redrafts. And also something like to keep in mind is this list we put together, Rob, some of these guys in keeper leagues should be targeted right now because they're all either unknown or on off seasons. So here's what we're going to start with. Starting at QB, I'm going to go with Jordan Love here. So this is why I think Jordan Love is going to be an interesting pick this year. I'm not saying the guy is going to definitely be a top 10 quarterback. I'm not saying like, hey, he's going to come out of nowhere. I'm saying that everybody's overlooking him as if he's a Sam Darnold type. He's not a Sam Darnold type. Jordan Love will definitely finish middle of the pack. I have to believe that. In our league, we saw Dak Prescott just get dropped. So if I'm on the waivers right now and I'm looking at Dak Prescott, I'm looking at Dak Prescott on Dallas, and I'm looking back at my team with Jordan Love as a young quarterback, and I actually want Love more. I have Jalen Hurts as my starter, but I am thinking with the way Jordan Love's been in the offseason, where they're focusing on him as a number one, when he's coming from such a pedigreed QB room like Aaron Rodgers. Now, I know Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, they have their history and they have their reputations and stuff, but at the end of the day, what I saw in the media and everything was that Aaron Rodgers was actually a great mentor to Jordan Love, much like Brett Favre ended up being a good mentor to Aaron Rodgers. And they both sat for a few years, and now Jordan Love is ready to take over the reins while Rodgers goes on. I think Jordan Love with Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, A.J. Dillon there, Aaron Jones around him, with all the focus on him in the offseason, do not be surprised if Jordan Love puts up 3,400 yards passing, maybe a couple hundred running. I think he's going to have 20 TDs in the air, maybe 23 total. I think you're going to see some ball security issues, but that's to be expected. Biggest jump you're going to see right now is not from Kenny Pickett. Jordan Love's going to be someone to target late as your QB2 or in a super flex league.
I love that take. I also happen to love Justin Fields. I don't believe it's that much of a stretch to say that Fields had himself a breakout year last year, over 2,000 yards passing, over 1,000 yards rushing. This is the type of quarterback that me and Ryan have been talking about, i.e. the Jalen Hurts that he owns. These are the new quarterbacks for fantasy. You want the guys that can not just throw, but you want them to be able to run. 1,000 yards from a quarterback, I'll take it all year long. I believe he'll fall in this draft. Again, the news is out, of course, on Fields and all the ridiculous NFL stories out of training camps. He looks like a field general and he has a huge penis. I was like, that doesn't mean anything for me in fantasy, but
It means a lot.
I like Fields a lot. I think I'm going to bear down on that penis. I think that Justin Fields is going to end up being a pretty solid quarterback. I want to see him, of course, be consistent with the throws, but for him to be a top 10 quarterback this year, for sure, and more than likely, he'll probably be one of the later quarterbacks that get drafted. I guarantee you 10 quarterbacks get drafted before Justin Fields even gets drafted this year. Now you can get a quarterback with hopefully some accuracy improvements. Again, the team around him has gotten better, so I'm looking at Justin Fields at quarterback this year where he can be drafted.
With that being said, let's move on to some running backs here. I mean, I absolutely love having these conversations because I do think Justin Fields, people are going to pop off and try to grab early in the draft, but they don't know why. With DJ Moore being there, that's something could really change if Justin Fields took a Jalen Hurts step in the offseason. But talking about taking a step in the offseason, James Cook, I think, is going to be undoubtedly the primary running back for the Bills this year. I really am not scared about Damian Harris. I have him on my team in addition, just in case, because I think Damian Harris is really going to be a goal line guy. James Cook, coming off a season in which he didn't get a whole lot of playing time behind Devin Singletary, he actually managed in over, I think it was like 170 attempts or something like that. He had a large number of attempts, but I believe he had like a 5.7 yards per carry average, which is absolutely phenomenal. It's what you want to see. So yeah, it looks like 89 attempts, 507 yards, 2 TDs. This is with basically zero playing time. Later in the season, week 16 against Chicago, 11 attempts, 99 yards, 1 TD, and he had a catch for 9 yards with 2 targets. James Cook is going to be insane fantasy value this year. He's switching numbers with his brother, with his brother's permission. He's going to wear number 4 for the Bills this year, which Dalvin Cook wore at FSU. As we all know, James Cook is going to be the underhyped guy that you can get rounds 4 or 5, just like Josh Jacobs last year, and you are going to get insane value.
Yeah, this is going to be my darkest of horses in this podcast here.
He's
Deuce
black.
Vaughn, who wow, running backs. Deuce Vaughn is my guy that I'm looking at this year, and I believe he's going to end up taking on the role that the new RB1 in Dallas, Tony Pollard, used to have. I think Deuce Vaughn is a very shifty, very interesting, very fast running back out of K-State. He was very good in college where Dallas drafted him. Shows that there's probably going to be some touches there, i.e. like what you're talking about with James Cook even just last year. But somebody else is going to have to complement Tony Pollard, or even if Tony Pollard happens to go down. We haven't seen Tony Pollard really be the RB1 for an entire season. So let's see what happens there. But I take a last pick waiver dart throw, whatever the heck you want to use, for an analogy with Deuce Vaughn. But I say go look at Vaughn very late in drafts this year. I think he might be an interesting pickup.
I think that's a great analysis right there. If Tony Pollard goes down, they don't have Zeke anymore. So it's guys, listen to Rob on this one. He's very good with these kind of up-and-coming rookies coming out of college. Whereas I tend to do a little bit more of my research as I see them hit training camp. And as we're talking about training camp, let's get into wide receivers. Who remembers this name? John Mechie III.
Me.
So this guy was actually born in Taiwan, sat out all of last year, we know, because he had, diagnosed with a form of leukemia. But what's really interesting is, even though he's not the biggest guy, 5'11", 100 some odd pounds soaking wet, he made a splash with Alabama, as most wide receivers in Alabama do. You don't play Alabama wide receiver unless you're good at this fucking game. The NFL drafted him round 2, pick 44. But he was so good that he even got one of those honorary Canadian Football League drafts where they know they're not going to sign the guy. So I think the same year, it was like round 7, Canadian Football League drafted him, but they knew he was going to sign with the NFL. So he went to the Texans, coming off national championship in 2020. He made second team All-SEC 2021. This guy was actually pretty hyped. One of the better wide receivers coming in the league. And I drafted him with my second pick in our keeper draft, where we do the 2-round draft. Mostly because I knew he was going to be sitting out the whole year and he wasn't really on anybody's radar. I think that with C.J. Stroud, Damian Pierce, who would we say is going to be there? Devin Singletary as well in Houston. Then they've got also Robert Woods, Nico Collins. There's a little bit more of a solidified offense here in Houston. I don't think they're going to be a very good team, but John Mechie being 5'11" and primarily being a slot receiver, C.J. Stroud getting used to the game, watch these two to link up a lot this season.
Yeah, I'm going a younger wide receiver myself who'll be in his second year. Romeo Doubs, who you recently brought up to piggyback off of your love for love. Romeo Doubs, I like what I saw from him last year. Didn't get the ball much, and of course we saw Christian Watson kind of ascend to be that wide receiver 1. But I'm very interested. I'm very interested in wide receiver 2s all the time, and for common knowledge, well, wide receiver 1's going to get double covered. We'll have the better corner on him. I say watch out for Doubs. Again, another silly NFL story that him and Love are hooking up on the field and off the field and in the bedroom. That all sounds fine and fantastic, but I like Romeo Doubs this year. Again, another one that might be forgotten later on in the draft. Again, another dart throw. We're talking about guys that where we're drafting them could potentially be maybe a top 20, even a top, let's say top 20. Let's say top 20. Let's say a top 20 potential, again, where they're being drafted. I really do like Romeo Doubs. And, I want to see what Jordan Love has to do. We could probably mutually agree on the idea that Jordan Love has to do it this year, right? After sitting behind Mr.
The guy wasn't
Allstate or whatever.
He wasn't completely locked down to be a great quarterback. We knew what Jordan Love was. He was a second rounder, right? Like Jalen Hurts. Didn't they trade up for Jordan Love? But we see the talent there. We really do, and I believe Jordan Love.
Jordan Love, I think wasn't Jordan Love a first rounder?
Maybe I'd have to go back and look, but that's the thing.
I think
it's like
he was.
But I remember Packers traded up for him. They skipped over Tua or something like that, or I could be wrong. I might be confusing it with someone else, but I'm talking off the cuff here only because like what I was. What I think about that is he's probably going to be one of those guys that's just as good as Daniel Jones is in fantasy for the year. You know what I mean? I know we're not crazy about him, but speaking of him, it's Darren Waller. I think is going to be the biggest value on the Giants. I think this guy's going to plummet in redrafts. You could probably get him very late. He finished position ranked 28 last year, and the year before maybe even worse because of the injuries and stuff he was dealing with on the teams he was dealing with. But the 2 years before that, he put up almost 1,200 yards catching. You're talking Kelsey numbers. Even Kittle hasn't been keeping up with this. I'd have to say, Dallas Goedert, Darren Waller, they're up there with the elite tight ends that just don't get enough numbers right now for people to realize how good physically they are. Darren Waller's going to be great value this year, guys. I think Jones is going to dump off to him a lot. Watch what happens if Saquon sits. Waller's going to be getting tons of targets. And another tight end I think no one's thinking about. Why don't you tell us about Dulcich?
Yeah, Greg Dulcich from Denver made a nice little splash last year. Seems shifty enough, good hands. Again, we're talking about tight ends we can get, or players that we can get later on in drafts. I would love to talk about Cole Kmet at length, as we've talked about quite often, and with me pushing the Fields narrative. Kmet was another, I think, top 7 or something in tight end touchdowns. So too easy. I think Greg Dulcich could be a guy later on in drafts. Once again, more stories about how Denver's looking good and Russell Wilson is skinny and let's die or whatever the hell he says. So I don't know. Greg Dulcich, every tight end to me is, as you know, if you've listened to this podcast, is a complete dart throw, not named Travis Kelce. I don't care how many times we have to talk about Mark Andrews supposedly surpassing him. It's not going to happen. Lamar Jackson has a hard enough time being able to speak, let alone throw a football. I think Greg Dulcich could be a pretty interesting guy this year. See if Denver can kind of make their way along the season and hopefully do a lot better than they did last year. But it's at least worth a shot. Go draft Greg Dulcich. Why not?
Running blacks. Rachaad White is my guy that I'm going with for our super flex here. So we're going to pick one flex guy. There's overall a guy we're talking about, and they both happen to be running blacks at this point. But Rachaad White is the guy I'm looking at this year. Baker Mayfield's taking over the helm at Tampa, and might see a little bit of a drop-off for Godwin, Mike Evans, guys like that. But I think with Fournette gone and the signing of Chase Edmonds, Rachaad White is going to be a monster this year that kind of goes under the radar. And he has proficiency as a pass catcher, guys. Go watch film of him catching. But even last season, like with the limited amount of time he had playing behind Fournette, he put up 129 attempts, 481 yards, and got a TD. And I believe, over Fournette, White had a couple of TDs through the air. So you're going to see a lot of touches for this guy on Tampa, maybe a 350 touch season. And the reason he's going to be so valuable is just basically because of where you're going to end up getting him in these rounds. Rob, if I had a spitball, we were saying we think like McCaffrey could be a first overall pick, like Eckler could be a first overall pick, Justin Jefferson could be a first overall pick, right? That's kind of what we were going with. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking when you look at like you start naming off all those guys, no one's going to come to mind Rachaad White. So me personally, I think this year, watch out. I think you're going to see a lot of weird names around him probably, like DeAndre Swift, Pittman Jr. You're going to see Mike Evans. You're going to see David Montgomery, and you're going to be like, hey, I know that name. I'll take a chance on them. Don't. Rachaad White. If you could get him like 6th, 7th round, you're going to have the best. You're going to have the best flex position of anybody in your league. I promise.
Yeah, I guess we could say he's a running white. I'm looking at Jeff Wilson, the old going back to the well on Jeff Wilson. He finally found himself in Miami, where they have just had a carousel of running backs, too many to even freaking think about, let alone name. But when the Niners went and got McCaffrey, clearly Jeff Wilson, in their eyes, was worth shipping out. Even when he went to Miami, he had a couple good games where he was the lead back. I feel like if he is just given a chance, which, of course, this correlates with the fact that, Miami doesn't get Dalvin Cook because there's potential there. But I think Jeff Wilson could be the guy later on. Again, just freaking absolute dart throw on a Jeff Wilson. If he is able to separate himself from the rest of the pack in that running back room, I think Jeff Wilson could totally be worth the pick later on in the draft. So go take a look at Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was thinking, like, even Jeff Wilson, you'd have to assume he's not going to pop up anytime earlier than the 7th, 8th round, right?
No, and he could have like a season, another guy off the top of my head, Khalil Herbert was another guy. I just think those two dudes, given the opportunity, could, no pun intended, run away with the job, almost similar to what Cam Akers did last year, who, as you know, I'm very high on, and there was a muddy backfield, but this guy's ahead of him and that guy's ahead of him. Literally in the NFL, it takes 1 or 2 games, especially in fantasy, post a 20, 25-point game. They're going to allow that guy to keep running until it stops.
Yeah.
And for some of these guys, like Derrick Henry, who was stuck behind whoever it was for like
Murray.
3 years. Yeah, DeMarco Murray. Wasted talent for 3 years. Jeff Wilson, not saying he could be a Derrick Henry, but I could maybe see 1,000 yards rushing out of a Jeff Wilson if given the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say with these guys.
Same thing with Khalil Herbert. Same thing.
Rashad White, Jeff Wilson, I think are 1,000-yard from scrimmage guys this year, and that's absolutely fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll work out. And I think, guys, take note of this list. It's actually a number of. If you are playing in competitive leagues or keeper leagues, you want to take a look at all these names we just mentioned. Make sure they're not on rosters at the moment. If your league is smart, most of these guys will already be rostered. But go and take a chance. Maybe try to acquire them. Next week, we're going to get back into more baseball. There is baseball on now after the All-Star break, so we're going to see some games go through, and then me and Rob are going to get back to looking at some of the trends and pickups and the drops. So once again, this is Fantasy R&R with Rob and Ryan. We will see you next time.